All right.
Good morning. Good
Good,
afternoon.
good morning. Good afternoon, everybody.
Morning.
Welcome to our 8th webinar in the National Tribal Energy Roundtable series. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Marina Barnett. I'm a program manager with the United States Energy Association. And in case you're not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit, apolitical, non-lobbying organization founded in 1924. USCA's mission has two pillars of equal importance. We serve as a resource by convening energy stakeholders to share policy, scientific, and technological information to foster the advancement of the entire energy sector. Internationally, USCA promotes energy development by expanding access to safe, affordable, sustainable, and environmentally acceptable energy in partnership with the US government. Comprised of more than 100 domestic international organizations, USCA's members include government agencies, nonprofits, think tanks, educational institutions, and Fortune 500 companies, encompassing every type of energy source. As an industry resource, USCA seeks to inform and promote a positive, effective dialogue on a path forward in energy policy and its implementation. USCA presents several flagship events every year and conducts a variety of webinars, briefings, and workshops. We provide also a nonpartisan, unbiased platform for the expansion of ideas, concerns, and solutions regarding all relevant energy issues. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Michael Moore, a program director with USCA. Mike, the floor is yours.
You bet. Marina, thank you very much, and especially for putting this together and getting it up and running with the guys to make this happen. I'm Michael Moore. I'm a program director with USCA, as Marina said. Been working programs like this and others for a number of years with USCA is internally and also prior to this as an external resource. Primarily focusing on our consensus program with the DOE, which is to educate the public, policymakers, industry, and other stakeholders and build a consensus on the benefits of carbon capture, utilization, sequestration, and carbon management technologies, in keeping with its mission to increase understanding of energy developments domestically and internationally. USCA's consensus program, launched in 2008, is a cooperative program with the US DOE, fossil energy, and carbon management to promote consensus on and need for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCUS, and other carbon management technologies to meet the world's decarbonization goals. While dramatic progress continues to be made in developing these technologies, neither the progress achieved to date nor the full capacity of CCUS and carbon management technology is widely understood. Yet it must be if they are to have a significant global impact. The reality that much of the developing world will continue to use fossil fuels for decades to come further underscores the need for these technologies. These technologies also support an expanding carbon market of opportunities for the use of CO2 and carbon byproducts in the production of cement, fertilizer, fuels, and more. Deployment of CCUS and carbon management technology holds the potential for rural job creation and revitalization through the energy transition. On this global journey towards decarbonization, in addition to CCUS and carbon management, consensus promotes the importance of other energy technologies surrounding hydrogen, energy storage, and rare earth elements and critical minerals that are essential to national security, electrification, and life in the 21st century. And inside that, we have the honor of working with Daniel Cardenas and CJ Stewart. I've known and worked with both these gentlemen for a number of years, with Daniel being the chair of the National Tribal Energy Association and also Shasta Consulting, which he is the founder and CEO of, and then CJ Stewart, the energy director for the Crow Nation, as well as a founding board member of NTEA. Again, thank you, Daniel and CJ, for the great friendship, the relationship, and the work that you guys are doing. With that, I'm going to turn this over to you because you got a really cool program here, Daniel, and off to the races.
No worries. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the start of our, like Marina said, our 8th webinar of a series. The second for this year. Our previous 6 were earlier last year. And so I've noticed with some of the attendees that we have some reoccurring folks in the audience, and so that's great. And so today's webinar is The official title is Energy Technologies and Research and Development, Conceptualization, Scientific Research, Commercialization, and Options for Indian Country. And so that's really a lot, to swallow. And given that we have only an hour or so, the intent wasn't to cover all of that. It was to start the conversation for Indian Country. We could have multiple. That topic alone could have its own conference of multiple days talking about these subjects, which are very heavy and very important to Indian Country. And so like as I said, the intent is to start the conversation. Hopefully, the dialogue that we have this morning will be able to grow. I'm a strong believer in our tribal beliefs, and especially in my tribe, which is the Pit River Tribe of California, which is a small tribe in northeastern part of the state, and in that our words have power, well, good and bad. If we do things in a good way, good will happen, and if we do things in a bad way, bad will happen. And so, given that our words have power, that was the whole point, is to, in a good way, start this conversation so that it can evolve and grow into something positive for Indian Country. So with that, I'll introduce myself, and then I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague and partner, CJ Stewart, and then Richard and Cleve can then introduce themselves, and then we can start. But again, I'm Daniel Cardenas. As Mike said, I am the chairman and CEO of the National Tribal Energy Association, which is a tribal association which represents 4 largest energy producing tribes in the nation, producing over 90% of the energy currently produced on a BTU basis in Indian Country. But we wear many hats. As I said, I'm a member of the Pit River Tribe of California. I served on the tribal council. My first term was when I was 18, when I was a sophomore in college. And now I just turned 50 in May. And so for over the last 30 years, I don't know how many times I've served on the council. I've forgotten and probably want to forget sometimes. But being a tribal leader sometimes is a thankless task. I can go on, and I'd rather not talk about myself. I'd rather have our guests talk about themselves. But I will say that we have brought I think really 2 important, along with ourselves, 2 important folks in Indian Country to speak on these issues. And so with that, I'll turn it over to CJ, and then Richard and Cleve.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. I just wanted to thank Richard and Cleve for helping us out here with this. I know we're going to be diving into this more or less more like a podcast. We're going to have a discussion. We're going to try to start this conversation. I know there's a lot of folks in Indian Country that kind of bring things like this up, but there's really no conversation going on nationally. So we're trying to spin it off here. I serve as the energy director for the Crow Nation. Prior to that, I was independent, working in DC with Daniel and I and some others, and prior to that, I served 2 terms in the Crow legislative branch, and 2 terms, 8 years. I was natural resources chairman, infrastructure chairman, served on a national coal council 2 terms, served on a state coal council for the state of Montana for 1 term, and was the first Native American to even be considered to be on that council. So kind of come a long way, and of course the Crow tribe is a coal tribe, and so we do have interests in the re and critical minerals piece, knowing full well that it's not just renewable energy that it services. There's a whole array of things that the re and critical minerals contribute a large amount to, and whether it's medical, manufacturing, things like that, here in the United States, those are big topics. And we're going to try to have these discussions. I know there's a lot of folks that don't want to get involved with the and critical minerals after they kind of find out that there's a lot of mining involved. There's going to be a lot of mining involved, and more so than coal mining. I can tell you that right now. Being that we're so, blessed with all these resources in Indian country, the tribes hold 90% of the and critical minerals. And so we need to have this discussion and start having some ideas about what the tribes needs are and wants, and carve out a path forward. And that's where this conversation is going to go. So I want to go ahead and hand it back to Daniel, and then he can introduce Richard and Cleve. Thank you.
Well, Richard, you can start. You guys can better introduce yourselves than I would ever do. So I'd rather not read off your bio. I'd rather you tell us who you are. The folks, the attendees, can look at the website and look at the bios and the pictures there. But in some words, please, Richard, can you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Daniel and CJ, for inviting me to participate with you all today in this webinar. Michael, Marina, thank you as well. Cleve, nice to meet you. My name is Rich Lewarke. I am from the Pueblo of Laguna, one of the 19, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Southwest tribes, it's one of the 19 Pueblos in New Mexico, one of 23 tribes that include the Navajo and 2 Apache tribes as well. And I grew up in Laguna the majority of my life, raised by my grandparents there. Our tribe, as you may be aware, at one point had one of the largest open pit uranium mines in the world from 1950 to 1981. So I was too young to work in the mine before it closed, but it was a huge impact, both positive and negative, in our community. I've been able to serve in our tribal leadership. I've served as far as our governor. I've served in the council in other community roles, so I have a strong understanding and basis of what these kind of issues are and how we need to look at them through the community and tribal lens. But I've also been on the economic side and being able to work on the business side of not only our tribe, but being an entrepreneur myself. And right now, I really see an opportunity for tribes economically, community-wise, education-wise, revitalization-wise, as it relates to the world of energy. So hopefully I'll be able to contribute some nuggets of thought provocation today. So thank you again for inviting me to join you.
Cleve, can you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks everybody for having me today. Cleve Davis. I'm a data scientist with the Idaho National Lab in the Dynamic and Spatial Systems Analysis group and the Decision Sciences Department. I'm a member of Shoshone-Bannock Tribes. I currently live here in Fort Hall in the Fort Hall Indian Reservation, and grew up here. And I went to school initially I went to school for botany. And when I got done with my botany degree, I went and worked for the Bureau of Land Management as a botanist and later as a natural resource specialist. And then after that, I started an environmental consulting business and did that for quite a few years. And from there, I went and did a PhD in environmental science and went back to work for my tribe as a environmental coordinator with the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes. And mainly in that position, I was involved with setting up government-to-government consultations between the feds and the tribes and trying to maintain and enhance tribal treaty rights. And then from there, I went to academia and worked a little bit as a adjunct professor. And then from there, I got a job here at the Idaho National Lab as a data scientist. And here I'm mainly involved in, from a lot of different things, from mining, critical mining, web map development, to developing software for environmental analysis. Just a lot of different things here at the lab that we work on. But that's me. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Cleve. Thanks, Richard, for kindly agreeing to participate in this conversation. And again, the reason why I've asked you guys to speak is because obviously CJ and I, we have we've are old tribal leaders. It's like the mafia. You never done. You never can quit. I always joke about being a tribal leader is that they always pull you in. Even if you're retired at some point. And so being tribal leaders, like I said, all of us are tribal leaders in one way or another, even if we're not elected. So I see somebody like Cleve, who's a friend and colleague as a tribal leader in his community because of his success academically and not just because of his job with the INL, but just because of who he is as a man and as a father and as a community member in his community. And so I asked Richard to speak as well because of his background as a leader in his community, former elected leader, but also, as he mentioned, also working from the economic development perspective, as well as his background, as well as an academic, because he also received his PhD as well. And so I think two well-rounded, very capable and educated and men and leaders in our communities to start this conversation. And again, like I said, it's a very heavy conversation about research and development, particularly when it comes to energy and everything that evolves from that, right? And so, really, in Indian country, nobody's having this conversation. That's why I think we're at the right time when a lot of conversations are happening right now around the energy transition, around energy, around technology, our environment, and where we're going as a world, as an earth, as a people, but more importantly, where we're going as a nation, and then within our regions and as tribes. I think it's important. Because with everything, and people probably get tired of me talking about it, but I always say tribes and tribal communities are always the last to be invited to the dinner table, and we're always the first to be asked to leave. And that's in the context of government funding in the past when times have been good, and then when we have to belt tighten as a nation, we're always the first to be cut and drastically cut. So our tribes, our governments have gone up and down in terms of their funding, and so but I say that sometimes in jest, sometimes in all seriousness, because these are the issues that I thought about when I was a tribal leader, when I first turned 18 and I first got elected to my council as a sophomore in college. One of the first things that I was tasked to do was to represent the tribe, our council, in negotiations with the FERC and relicensing of some hydro facilities operated by Pacific Gas and Electric, which is the utility and the primary utility in Northern California. And without any background, without any degree, without any knowledge of the FERC licensing or relicensing process, I was thrown into the fire. And so I did that, and also worked with one of the a local energy generation developer called Calpine, who at that time was based in San Jose, California. I think they're in Houston now, but they're one of the largest independent power producers in the country. They were developing a geothermal power project, or they had a lease from BLM to do some prospecting for geothermal in the Medicine Lake Highlands, which is a very sacred area for our tribe. And so that started a process of litigation, which I believe still exists to this day, over 20 plus years, almost 30 years. The litigation has been going on, I believe. So that's how I started. But this idea, this of research and development has always been in my mind, even though I didn't come from a background of being a scientist or anything close. I did economics in college, but you know, I've always been um, sort of fixated on it. And but really from the perspective as tribes, and as we all know, due to our tribal sovereignty and due to our special relationship with the federal government, this trust relationship, you know, we have a special opportunity, a special tool in our toolbox that nobody else has. It's that relationship with DOE, with DOD, with all the not just the energy national labs, but the defense labs as well that DOD has through this relationship that nobody else, that cities and counties, states, although they have relationships with them, our relations is different. And so it's something that most tribes have not used, or maybe not even be aware of, that they have this tool in their arsenal to be able to engage with the national labs, with DOE on this idea of research and development. And so really I wanted to throw it out there first to Richard and to CJ about, and also Cleve, but from the tribal government perspective, as ex-tribal leaders and current tribal leaders, you know, as you know, we have a bunch of stuff on our plates as tribal leaders. I mean, energy is just one of dozens of things that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And so we're very stretched thin. A lot of tribes don't have capacity. We don't have the staff or the budgets to be able to deal with all these different subjects and problems and issues. And so, but the way our relationship with the federal government exists is that a lot of these have to come internally from the tribes, meaning we have to ask the federal government for help. And if we don't know what to ask for, we don't know what we don't know, we're not going to ask. And so that, to me, that's part of the conundrum of this issue, is that in order for us to be part of the future, we're already into the 23rd, 24th year of the, however you calculate. I know somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong, but the 21st century when it actually started, but basically into the second decade of the 21st century. But many of our tribes are still in the late 1900s, if not even earlier, in terms of everything, and the way we do things, the way we store records, the way we handle things. We're still pretty much in a different age when everybody else is in the digital age. So how do we this question goes to how we catch up and how we're part of the table, so to speak, as we move forward. So it's going to take a lot of change internally from tribal governments in the way we do things. And so so that's sort of my open-ended question to you guys is, given this sort of opening and this idea of the opportunities around, it's particularly around energy, critical minerals, but research and development, and the opportunity to partner with that national labs, partner with industry, academia, that has to be internal to the tribes, meaning they have to request it and have strategies and have ways of dealing with that internally. So how do we get our tribes, our tribal governments to that point, especially if they don't know what they don't know? I mean, that, like I said, so I'll leave that open to Richard and to CJ. How would you respond to that?
Well, I guess I can go first. Well, thank you again for allowing me to participate, and thank you for the question. In my mind, we're sitting at a very opportune time for tribes. Not only as tribal governments, but as community. And what I say, and why I say that is, and I've said in other panels and discussions, tribes, we're like China. And what I mean by that is the tribal governments own everything. They own they own the land, one of the biggest assets or pieces that you need in creating economies and creating businesses. They own all the businesses. They're all tribal owned businesses. So it's very hard for an individual tribal member to contribute to the economic prosperity and intellectual advancement of a tribe. So in my mind, and I've said it even when I was serving as governor, that the innovators don't reside in the tribal council chambers. The innovators are in our community. The innovations in our people. So I think one big piece is that we need to give our community members, our people, the opportunity to engage in cultivating and participating in the economic prosperity of our tribes going forward. I think that I think that right now, we have tribal members across the country that have degrees, anywhere from associates to PhDs to MDs to lawyers, but we also have very critical skill sets and vocational skills, trade skills. We need all those to be engaged. And so I think that our native people, and using Chaco Canyon as an example from my tribes, the Southwest tribes, history, they tell us that Chaco Canyon, some of you may be familiar with that sun symbol. That's how they tracked the moon and the sun over many years to eventually determine the solstice. So in my mind, that was one of the first examples of data analytics, data science. And why I share that is that our native people, we come from a long line of genius, but we can't fear that genius. We have to be able to execute it now and be able to contribute to this creation. So in given that context, when I think about things like economic development is different from business development. Economic development is, in my mind, you're creating the conditions for success. That's a government function. You're creating the laws, the policies, providing the infrastructure, the roads, the hospitals to allow and enable business to execute. That needs to incorporate a private sector component. And so I think that when that gets incorporated, you're going to begin to see our tribal communities flourish, because now you're going to be able to engage the innovators, the creators, the risk takers. Government by nature, tribal or not, government is very risk averse. They want everything 100% guaranteed that it's going to succeed. That's not real. And so I think when you can create that kind of environment, you not only create, again, the conditions for success, but you begin to breed excitement and intrigue and the opportunity that, hey, we can contribute as community members. So when I think about energy and thinking about it, when you look at our communities and culture, we're taught that everything in the earth, everything on the earth, and everything around the earth, it was all provided for us here by our Creator. The very same power that created all those elements is the very same power that allows our heart to beat. But we're the ones that are causing the fight between what's in the earth and what's around the earth. We need to figure out, how do we become the catalyst for those powers and those resources, those gifts to collaborate, to coexist, so that we create a situation of having infinite resources versus finite. We need to create a situation where it's a 1 + 1 is greater than 2 versus 1 + 1 = 2. And I think in our native world, going back in native or tribal governments, going back to the role of tribal government is deeply rooted in the 1 + 1 = 2. If you take them out of that and try to get them to go to 1 + 1 is greater than 2, that's hard. But it's not a hard thing for our community members that are the innovators. So I think in a long-winded way, we need to encourage our tribal governments to not fear the talent of our people, instead to exercise it and to embrace it. And I think in this energy world, thinking about how do we use the system that our creator has given us, and I say system because when you look even at Earth is an open system, right? Meaning we get energy from the sun. We're not a closed system, we're an open system. That's a competitive advantage. But we've closed our systems, and now we're struggling because we've reframed it in a finite framework versus an infinite framework. So I think government really needs to be able to, tribal government really needs to operationalize their sovereignty and exercise and behave in a finite framework versus or infinite framework versus a finite. And I think that's how we begin to change our mindset from a catch-up strategy versus a leadership strategy. So those are the thoughts I would share, just simply around how do we rethink and reimagine the role of tribal government and tribal leadership in this energy space and the opportunity that is before us right now. And again, a big part of that equation is our people, because we're looking for, I guess the analogy I would use is we're looking for a chemical equation. We want a reaction, we want an outcome versus just a mathematical equation where it's just a finite outcome. So I'll go that far.
I think I'm going to add to that too as well. You know, I agree with you, Richard. You know, I think it's an issue of participation. And in Indian country, you know, you pointed on some things there that's very true. You know, especially in leadership, we see, you know, a lot of times, you know, leaders come into office and they wanna, you know, get a deal done and hit the ball out of the park so they can show their voters that, you know, yeah, you guys are right, you voted in the right guy, kind of a thing. But a lot of times they miss out on all the you know, all the things that make up to those bigger opportunities, and kind of bypass it because of the reasoning. They might only have 2 years in office, you know, so they have to try to get through something that's gonna, you know, rock the vote for them, you know, for the next time around. I'm talking politics because, you know, that's what we have to deal with in Indian country. You know, we have to deal with 4-year term, 2-year term, and when we're talking about a lot of times when we're talking about, you know, issues like this, it you know, hookups take time. 80% of this whole thing is probably going to be, you know, education, research, and everything before anybody ever starts really doing anything. And so, you know, leadership sees that and they think, well, we've got a lot of time. We don't need to talk about it now. But, you know, it's a conversation for now, especially when we're talking about, you know, areas of, you know, national security, you know, with weapons, military weapons. You're talking about consumer goods, you know, that need the and critical minerals, the medicine and medicine manufacturing of some of these, you know, softwares and different things that we're going to need in the medical field. And that's a huge one too, because, you know, not everybody, you know, not, you know, I just recently, you know, was in the hospital. And so, I mean, I see a lot of importance there where they depend on the technology. You know, they depend on a lot of the technology to try to assist in securing a person's health. And you look at, you know, first, you know, then of course, you know, the energy. You know, 90%, like I said before, 90% of all the and critical minerals is on Indian country. And I think a lot of the the tribes need to have that understanding. And I think we have a tool in our arsenal that we don't necessarily use very much often, but I think where governments can play a big role with, rather than trying to be big brother, man, over your shoulder kind of a thing. I think what they could do is split some of this responsibility and talk with their boards at their tribal colleges, and see if they can implement some of this some of this information into the tribal colleges, so that not necessarily young people. I mean, everybody goes to college, but the folks that want to learn. That's a place where they want to learn. They're paying for it. And so with that being said, you look at it and think, well, if whatever field they're in, they need to understand that there's some re and critical minerals that need to be involved there. That where does that come from? They need to have that understanding, going after these re and critical minerals, depending on the different production methods and developing methods that occur. I think they need to understand that there's going to be a lot of they're going to have to mine for this stuff, and it's probably going to be a lot more mining than coal, a lot more mining than anything else. If we're wanting to get into the market, wanting to get into the, I guess, competitive market with the world right now, China's pretty much controlling the the pace of that particular product, and it's a big one. We're dealing with a lot of the areas of this, with, like I said, energy, consumer products. I mean, shoot, the health field, military weapons, military software, guidance, and just areas such as that. I mean, I think what we need to do is try to implement something, maybe even talk to the labs and see if that's something. I know they've been tasked with where the NETL has been tasked with DOE to look at trying to find availability and make some of this available, and where they're at with that. I'm sure they're probably moving along. I think some of that information needs to be shared with the tribal governments, and if the tribal governments choose to work with their tribal colleges, I think that's an avenue as well. Then of course we've got these webinars, and we're trying to educate the folks and the people, and just try to get this conversation going, because we're in a position right now where the Native Americans don't need to be begging for anything anymore. We can be the lender, and we don't need to be the tail. We can be the head. Everything's in favor of Indian country, and I think the U.S. government needs to see that, and I think that's where the Native American communities are waking up to the fact that 60% of all net fossil fuels is in Indian country, and 90% of all re and critical minerals. The path to renewable energy is through Indian country, and we need to take that into account. That's a great responsibility that the Creator has given us, and that I believe that we need to look at it, be strong about it, have an understanding of where we need to go with this, and try to do it responsibly, and in a manner to where you don't just get all these fly-by-nights. And I know tribes get a lot of fly-by-night developers coming in saying, "Oh, promising you the world and whatnot," and saying they're going to do all this and do all that. But there's of course we have to vet them out, but there's going to be a lot of that too as well. So I think we need to kind of keep an eye on that. I don't that's just my thinking. I think the tribal colleges would be a really good avenue to get messages out there to the folks that actually want to learn about some of this stuff. And then I think it'd be interesting for them to have an understanding, like if they're in the health field, to understand how much and critical minerals plays a part in that particular field that they're studying. And looking at some of the areas with the military, I mean, DoD, I think that needs to be established. I think we need to establish some relationships with, Department of Defense. With the Crow tribe, we have a friendship treaty, 1825 friendship treaty that was established way back before our main Fort Laramie treaties. And in those treaties, there was an agreement that they would protect our land, our resources, and our people, and we would do the same with them. Protecting their trade routes, helping them protect their representatives in these areas, and likewise to the Crow. And so, I think it would be in line with our treaties to speak with DoD and have these conversations, talking with the labs. And I think it'd be their obligation to listen and to try to find a path forward to move along the path of trying to get some of these and critical minerals developed, or find a way to get a consortium of tribes that want to do some development or have the interest in looking at what their opportunities are. And I think that's something that I think we need to kind of address. I don't know. I know Cleves from the National Labs. I don't know if he's itching to talk or to bring, say something to this, but I would offer, that as well, that, we need to not think that we can do it all. I mean, we're not, once we get elected, people think that we know it all. We're just the same guy we were yesterday. We just got a different hat on, and so, our willingness to serve is something, and I think that's something that we can utilize to serve our people and our communities in the region. So I would kind of ask, I would ask, if that maybe Cleve, you got something on that, you want to answer on something that in this topic?
I guess what I was thinking about here, and this is going back to my days when I had a small business, and I do see a lot of opportunities through funding opportunity announcements through like DOE for tribes to be involved in research and development. And I feel like they're not taking advantage of those as well as I'd like to see. But it goes back to my small business days, and I start thinking about the role of tribal government and Indian entrepreneurship. And I think there needs to be a balance between tribal government-led initiatives and individual entrepreneurships. And what I'm saying there is, and I can only speak from my experience here in Fort Hall, like I've seen where tribal government like should be careful on micromanaging economic development businesses. They got to be careful on how they do that, because if they micromanage it too much, they're going to stifle that innovation, that growth, these startups. And they should be, I guess their roles should be more clearly defined. I think like tribal governments, they should be focusing on like building the infrastructure, like providing internet, for example, protecting sovereignty, and maybe managing large projects. But they shouldn't be really getting involved in, I guess, small business initiatives. Like I've seen examples of, it's actually one of my relatives here wanted to start a broadband business on the reservation. And he put together a business license and he took it to the tribes, and the tribal government liked it. And they told him, you can't do it. And they scratched his name out and they put their name on it, and they went forward with it. And this was, I used to say 20 years ago, but now it's going on 30 years. And the tribal government still hasn't got internet established on the reservation. And so in that case, I think they should have stepped back and let the tribal member take that on and try and make something of it. And that's just my personal opinion. I'm not speaking for anyone but myself and things I see. But I've seen that where the tribal government will get into micromanaging these entrepreneurships and try to take control over these individual independent initiatives. And I think they just need to be careful on that. And there needs to be clear boundaries set there. So the tribal government has their boundaries, and then individual Indian entrepreneurships have their boundaries as well. And that's all I want to say on that.
All right, Daniel, are you still available there? I know we can talk circles around these subjects. I mean, it's just.
Looks like you have a question.
CJ, yes, if I can intervene for a second. We had a question. Okay, we had a question, but I guess Daniel answered it in writing, but if somebody would like to expand on that as well. And I'll just read it. How can national labs best support communication with communities about topics with a record of conflict over the course of decades, in particular nuclear energy or mining? Understanding that each location and groups of people and their socio-technical systems are different. What does right look like for an initial approach?
I was reading that one. I'll throw my 2 cents in there. I was thinking the best thing to do is be honest, open, and transparent about it. I mean, that's always the best approach, I think. And that's how I would start out with that if they're wanting to do that, and just be honest about it. And there are not all tribes are against like nuclear energy development either. There are some that are considering it. And so I'll just say that much.
Yeah, I would add to that in what Cleve said. I think there's again that opportunity to renew these relationships. I think from the tribal side, we can't continue to lead with fear. We have to definitely understand and recognize the challenges that have been that tribes have faced in the past, whether it's from national labs or the federal government itself or other groups. But we have to use that genius of our tribes. What have we learned, and how do we do better going forward? So I think there's an opportunity to reimagine those interactions, and as Cleve mentions, I think transparency is critical. And I also think tribes need to understand, what is going to be that purpose, because like for me, mining, I mentioned the Ijakpau Anaconda uranium mine in my tribe. There were about 7,000 acres at one time that were designated for mining. They actually mined about 4,000 of it. When the mine closed in 1981, right now, there's still about 44 million tons of tailings that are there. So in our area, our situation is different. I'm not a fan of mining, of reopening mining in that area, but I'm a big fan of cleanup. And there's enough tailings there to clean up for a number of years. So when they did the reclamation at our mines, after it closed down, I consider it, I guess, what I would call an engineering reclamation. They basically, EPA came in and group said, throw 18 inches of soil on top and monitor it for 20 some years and call it good. Right? They did the erosion, on the sides of the canyon, the walls where they were blasting and those kind of things, so they won't crumble anymore. So to me, it's an engineering reclamation versus an environmental reclamation, where that doesn't necessarily improve the quality of water over time or reutilization of the land. And so how can we do an environmental reclamation restoration versus just an engineering one? So I say that so that, I think as tribes interface with the labs interface with tribes, those are the kind of things that we can be thinking about. And how do you make an economic opportunity out of that, from not only the tailings and maybe selling of low grade ore, but how do you create research opportunities so our people become the researchers versus being the researched? So I think those are ways that the labs can work and interface with tribes, so that you see a common positive outcome for both groups.
You know what? I would just say, you know, the thing I always bring up, and I bring it up because, there's a lot of, we have outstanding enrollment here with our college. And for some reason, when they hear something over there, whether it's some professor's opinion or not, it seems like it becomes, gospel truth to them as they're, you know, as they're learning whatever they're trying to learn, at the college. And I believe as well that the governments shouldn't micromanage, and that, a lot of this is new, and that they should, take up the fact that we don't know everything, and that, it's good to, create some synergy in the community, and, we have, nuclear, we have all these different opportunities, but a lot of folks are kind of afraid of these old technologies, which are new to them, based on the fact of some of the horror stories. We get a good idea coming in, about this, that, or another, and then you get folks outside folks, NGOs coming in, telling other things, and kind of putting scares in people's minds, because over here on the Crow Reservation, we don't own all the land. We have a lot of allotted land, so a lot of tribal members own their own land, and there's quite a few that own their own minerals as well, but the majority of the minerals is under the Crow tribe. And so, yeah, we have to really educate ourselves in these areas. I know that there's folks out there that just kind of hope that, that we, sign something and get involved with something, but at the same time, we don't know everything either. And I think that it's important that, we get our people involved, whether it's Pueblos or Crows or Navajos. Everybody has a tribal college, everybody has these opportunities, and everybody has these labs, and I think that, working with National Lab, working with, having these kinds of conversations in an open forum with some of the, folks in the area, I think would be very interesting for some of them to come out and participate in. And I think that would be really something for them to take home and chew on, and have a full understanding of what it takes, the goods and the bads of re and critical minerals. And so that's something that I would really focus on, is try to, educate, at the same time we educate, we're showing them and getting them on board, giving them some buy-in. Right now it's like, for me, being in a tribal side, looking at the re and critical minerals piece, you've got the U.S. government, telling us this, that, and another, and they're not sure either. And so I think, the folks that we depend on, if they're not sure about something, I think we need to kind of possibly all get together. And a lot of times, we have to move at the pace of business as well. you know, a lot of folks want to get involved in some of these areas, but at the same time, you know, what's our boundaries? What's our limitations? You know, I mean, we try to move one way without rules, they'll say no. We try to move one way without rules another way, they say no. And then we say, well, how far can we go? I don't know. You know, it's kind of like that. And so it's an open-end conversation. It's something that I know that we're going to have to look at. We're going to have to carve out some policy, you know, moving forward. And I think that's where Indian communities and tribal governments come forward with. You know, we have the information you know, that given to us. Sometimes we don't even know what it is. You know, like, you know, we got you know, what some folks don't understand what, you know, what the purpose is for and critical minerals. How does that affect me in a day-to-day life? How does that affect my voters in a day-to-day life? Is how they're going to look at it, you know, when we're talking about tribal government. And they'll be like, oh, this is going to take about 20, 30 years. And they'll be like, oh, shoot, I'll be out of office, you know. And so a lot of times they just kind of push it over. And that's probably what happened with you know, with Pueblo, you know, 50 years to 80, you know, 18 or to 1981. Shoot, that's quite a long time. They did that in Butte too, with that big you know, Superfund site, and that there's still a big hole there. I think going forward, I think we have the benefit of hindsight, Rich, you know, Cleve, you know, others. You know, we see the things that have been done, you know, the mistakes that have been made, and along with the intentions. But now that we have better technologies and a little bit better understanding, now we actually have a mandate. You know, we have to get this stuff going, you know, and the government's putting a mandate on themselves, you know, with NETL and DOE, you know, provide something, show us something, give us something to stand on, a path forward. And so, you know, that's kind of something that I see them, you know, pushing forward with. But at the same time, you know, we have the benefit of hindsight, and I think it's important for us to have that understanding of where we actually are positioned in this fight going forward. So, I hope I can probably continue, but I just want to, you know, give a chance to. I think we have more questions on our Q&A here, Marina. I don't know. Are you looking at it? We have a question for Cleve. Does your laboratory engage with tribes in the understanding that they have land ties with resources that could make work around resource education transparent?
Yeah, they engage with the tribes pretty heavily, the Idaho National Lab, and I'm not involved in those discussions too much, but I know they are. It's the DOE that I think they provide the tribes with some funding through I think it's probably a 93-638 contract to fund the tribal DOE office, and they do like environmental monitoring of the lab out there and the site. And they come out to the festival. They're involved in community events, and but as far as like resource extraction, I don't think the Idaho National Lab or DOE is extracting like minerals from the site area. As far as I know, they do development out there for like research projects and within their campuses. My understanding is most of the development is very limited to where these campuses are located, and that's where they deploy their new technologies and do their research. But I don't think they're involved in like taking minerals out of the ground and processing them.
I think we got the answer there on that one for who had that. That was shoot. That was anonymous attendee, I guess so hopefully we got the answer to that. Well, do we got anything more here? Wanna
CJ, I'm sorry. Let me butt in for a second, just once again. I know that Daniel answered the questions, but maybe Richard or Cleve have something to add. Somebody's asking, curious about the ratio of elected tribal representatives, official decision makers versus innovative tribal citizens. Is there an issue getting the right people into these discussions? And there are also a couple comments after that.
I guess to chime in on that one, as it relates to tribal leaders and decision makers and the innovators, as the old saying goes, if you know one tribe, you know one tribe, right? We're all different. And I think, there are, I want to be mindful and careful not to just use a broad paintbrush, that all tribes are the same, but there are some tribes that do very well at engaging their tribal member businesses, their tribal members, and these kind of things. It goes to what Cleve was saying earlier about that balance. And I don't think it's a delicate balance. I think it's a balance that you gain from maturity in your economy and the maturity and how you manage and how a tribe can manage business, and the maturity in the tribal government to allow its economy to work. And so I think that there you could have tribal councils that, if it's a really small tribe, you might have a situation where the tribal council is pretty progressive, very forward thinking, and can get some things going. You might have other tribes that are the opposite, that are just very bureaucratic, and drive their strategy based on their elected terms versus the long view. So I think there's a mix. It's a mixed bag, but I do think that our innovators, our tribal members, and I'm not just talking energy or technology. I mean, we have educators, we have attorneys, we have nurses. There's a lot of really smart people in our tribal communities that really sometimes don't get the chance to engage and contribute in growing out our economies. But I think it's also important that we're at a time where we need to be thinking about our economies. Tribal economies aren't defined by our reservation boundaries. Our economies, are influenced like many other economies. So I think I think those innovators, those tribal member innovators, don't reside just on tribal lands. What the ratio is, I don't know what that would be from tribe to tribe, but I think it's gonna vary from tribe to tribe on a number of factors.
Add a little bit to that too. I think there's tremendous potential with tribal members, and not just with tribe members, but United States citizens as a whole, especially with the national labs. And what we're seeing at the labs is that it's getting harder to find U.S. citizens, and very hard to find tribe members who are going into these STEM fields, like science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And the opportunities there for tribal members to go into that. And I wish I'd like to see more, because a lot of these funding opportunities that come out through DOE, they'll be wanting a business, like a startup business, to try to do a proof of concept of a new technology. And then the labs will partner with them and help them make that thing come to be and develop a new technology. And there's just those kind of things come up all the time. And it's kind of a struggle for the labs to find these businesses and these startups that are pursuing these activities. And I think probably one thing that the labs could probably do better is try and engage more with like individual tribal members versus the government. It's very heavily focused on government to government consultations, and it's almost like there's this fear to engage with just regular tribal members and not, and they go to the tribal government, and the tribal government has a say, and that's what they do. And it'd be nice to see more engagement with just like the tribal members, and show them the opportunities that are available to them. And I think they rely upon the tribal leadership to give that information out to their membership, but that don't always happen. But there are a lot of opportunities there, and some of the things I participate here with the INL is we go out to like the Shoshone-Bannock High School. We're going to be going to the Coeur d'Alene High School up in northern Idaho, and teaching them about hydropower. And we have them build like these little hydropower turbines. I'll talk to them about history the tribes has had with hydropower, and like we all know, any energy has its pros and cons. And but so we, when we go out and private education, we try to be transparent on all that, show them pros and cons. And then, but see, when you talk honestly and openly about that stuff, you could find people out there that will tackle these little issues and maybe make a technology that addresses an environmental issue or problem that is associated with that. And I think that the tribal members could really, with their culture and backgrounds, they could really probably be very innovative in that area of tackling these issues that are coming about from mining or wind turbines, all these energy development projects. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We just got to show it. We got to give the opportunity out there, and then try and nurture it. And that's where tribal governments can get involved, trying to nurture that. But yeah.
I think we had some other questions here. Marina, are you able to bring this up? Because I'm having problems with my side. All this pertaining to questions on sequestration.
Looks like all the answers or the questions in the Q&A were answered.
CJ, I'll jump in and read this. This is from Liberty Metcalf from the Osage Nation, not representing the nation, but she is a tribal member, and glad to be here. There's a lot of talk about our Minerals Council getting involved in carbon capture, specifically safety and how it affects the sovereignty of our mineral estate. Is this something you can speak on? And even if there aren't any specifics about the mineral estate, maybe something on your energy sovereignty experience.
I guess we could probably speak to some of that. I know that I was issued this national policy memorandum from Daryl LeCount from the Bureau of Indian Affairs on Carbon Sequestration Agreement Policy Amendment 1. And in that, there's a purpose, scope, background. I could forward that to them if they need to, but basically they're stating that, that it's not something that they'll cover basically, but they'll help you with the procedures, technical assistance, whatever needs to be done there. They'll assist the tribe in doing what they need to do concerning their carbon sequestration agreement. And so as far as questions of sovereignty, the BIA has some coverage, but I don't think they're really gonna, they're kind of, I'm not too sure if it's maybe not that they're familiar with this wholly, but this is something that they've extended for another year under their carbon sequestration agreement policy And that was issued November 4th, 2022. And so the purpose of the policy is to extend the MPS or MPM Trust 47 Carbon Sequestration Agreement policy issued on November 4th, 2022. For one additional year, this policy memorandum defines the Bureau of Indian Affairs' role regarding existing or proposed carbon sequestration contracts or agreements between the tribes and non-governmental organizations or other entities, describes guidance that the BIA will provide to tribes, and defines how the BIA will interpret carbon sequestration agreements in the fee to trust process. So the scope of this is the policy applies to all BIA employees involved in the review of the carbon sequestration agreements. And the background they say is carbon is not considered a trust asset because under carbon agreements, carbon is neither harvested nor extracted. Therefore, carbon is not considered a forest product. The carbon sequestration process refers to the national absorption from the atmosphere of carbon dioxide, CO2, by vegetation, trees, and soil, and storage of carbon in vegetation's trees and soils. Unlike trust assets, the value of carbon is derived from the ability and capacity to store carbon as opposed to its use or extraction, because it is neither a forest product nor an agricultural product. Under the relevant statutes and regulations, carbon is not considered a trust asset.
Fascinating.
I hope that helps the member from the Osage on this. There is policy written to this effect.
Well,
And
let me answer that. CJ, I was trying to let everybody else speak, so you know, I don't want to hog up all the time, and this has been these made a lot of great points, but you know, it behooves all of us as tribal leaders and tribal members to do our research, trust but verify. And there's a lot of information right now around carbon capture and sequestration, especially sequestration, right? But there's also a lot of misinformation that's out there. And so right now, especially in Texas, Louisiana, where CCUS is a hot topic, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, and then in the Midwest with some of the lines that are coming there, there's a lot of contention. And so what I'd say to the tribal member that asked the question, I'd say, do your research, ask questions of your tribal leaders. I personally believe that sequestration is safe. We've been dealing with carbon capture in transportation sequestration for decades here in Wyoming, where I live, in Texas, Louisiana, you know, and so there's a lot of there are obviously anything that man makes and does, there are going to be mistakes, and accidents. So not to say that nothing bad has happened, but for the most part, it's pretty safe. And so the point that CJ made with that letter from BIA, from Interior, basically what they're saying is, I'm not a lawyer, so this is just my interpretation and what I've heard from others, is that Department of Interior, BIA are not treating CO2 that's being sequestered as a trust asset. They're leaving it up to the tribes to decide, and they're not going to protect it like they would if it was oil or gas or something that you could sell. And so basically they're saying that if tribes have policies around ag or forestry, usually they have a tribal forest plan or tribal ag plan. If you have those, you can easily amend those to include rules around sequestration. And if you do that, then they don't, you know, that's all they care about. And so they're going to sort of leave that the decision and the discretion for tribes to get into sequestration up to them. It's not going to be a trust, or they're not going to have to put their stamp on it to move forward. And so hopefully that answers that question. But like I said, this is an area that's really important. It's really, you know, even though we've been doing it a long time, it's cutting edge because of IRA and the infrastructure bill. There's a lot of resources out there. So I'd say, you know, it's a good question, but it's also an opportunity for tribes, certain tribes that have good geology, because they own the pore space. And this pore space is where sequestration is happening is beyond 5, 6, 7,000 feet or deeper. It's not in the water table. It's not close to the surface where it leaks out. It's way deep where it has to be in geology where there's really no chance of it leaking out. And so I'm not a geologist, and so I'd say do your research. We can be a resource. Like I said, Mike Moore is one of the experts that I go to. He's been in this space for decades, and others. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to CJ and I or Mike or the team here at USCA, and we can get you the answers if we don't know. And so one of the things I wanted to say, I know we're up over an hour, is what this conversation has sort of brought up is that it's complicated. And so even though we didn't really touch on art research and development and the things that come from that, because I'm a strong believer that in tribal wealth and in wealth accumulation, and that one of the ways that our non-native partners, companies, industry, academics, even government make money is through intellectual property, patents. And they patent ideas, they create inventions, and they make money off of them. Tribes aren't even part of that. There may be individuals, tribal members who have made patents, and I would continue to support them. But like Cleve said earlier, there's not a lot of folks going into STEM, tribal members. They're going into healthcare, which is STEM. They're going into law. They're going into social work. They're becoming teachers. We need all these professions, but we also need STEM professions as well. And that's where a lot of the work that CJ and I are doing through the National Tribal Energy Association in our partnership with the Payne Institute at the Colorado School of Mines, our Native American Mining and Energy Sovereignty, the NAMES initiative. We've raised over $500,000 so far for scholarships for Native students to go to the School of Mines, for scholarships, for full ride scholarships. And we just gave our first scholarship to a lady from the Navajo Nation to study electrical engineering at the master's level. And so we're already doing that. So we're already starting to work on creating a pipeline to do that. And so, like I said, what this brings up is a lot of thorny and heavy issues that we have to resolve at our tribal governance level, at our tribal community levels. And as Rich and CJ pointed out, and Cleve, that there's a lot of just the relationship between our tribal governments and our tribal communities is always good. Is not always good. The problem is that the tribal government have to the feds talk to the tribal leaders. That's the structure that they've set up. And a lot of times tribal governments aren't always receptive to tribal communities. And as Rich pointed out, and as Cleve pointed out, that's where the innovation is, at the tribal community level. And that innovation is being stifled because of lack of capital, lack of support from the tribal government level. And the bottom line, like I said, is that in order for us to move forward, we've got to do something. And so but we have to include the tribal communities more. That's my opinion, just my humble opinion, is that tribal communities need to be engaged. And so folks from the national labs, from DOE, from the federal government, all the agencies, they go to the tribal government. And especially they in the past, it's been, they just do it. They use our resources. They go onto our lands. They sign contracts on our behalf without our input. Now it's moved full circle where they won't do anything basically without our input. But the problem is, if we don't know what we don't know, we're not going to ask those questions. We're not going to ask for that support. We're not going to ask for that technical assistance. And so how do we bridge that? And that's the ultimate question with this subject, with this discussion today, is how do we get our tribes involved in a bigger picture of research and development, energy research and development, which includes critical minerals? How do we get our tribal colleges involved? How do we get our tribal governments to support it? It takes votes, it takes politicians, it takes energy it takes leadership, and it takes us to step up and take that chance, right? A lot of us, I say, are in the closet, you know, and not make a joke of it. We're in the closet when it comes to some of these issues because we're afraid of the repercussions from our jobs when we work for the tribes, from our housing, we live in tribal housing, or if our spouses work for the tribes, or if our kids are getting tribal scholarships. You know, if we're getting support from the tribes and if we speak up and it goes counter to what tribal governments believe, we may lose out, but we've got to do that to move this forward. So I'll stop there. I know we have one more question.
Daniel,
Go ahead.
Daniel, this is Rich. Before you get to the question, I need to hop off here. I have another call in about 6 minutes here, and I got to prep for that. But thank you for allowing me to participate. I do need to hop off though.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for your time. And you know, I know Jan Turner is a friend of mine, and she's asking in regards to my comment about the last to be invited to the dinner table and the first to be asked to leave. She says, I feel where'd it go? It's empty. Oh, it's gone now. Hopefully, I don't know if I pushed
Sorry,
something.
I think I rushed with the formatting. The question is, I agree with Daniel's comment about being the last to be invited to the dinner table and the first to be asked to leave. I feel this is an ongoing cause of challenge and damage. How do we change these dynamics and set a different table?
Well, you know, and as I said, as tribal people, you know, and you know, we when it comes to politics, you know, we tread lightly, as I mentioned earlier, in tribal politics. In order for us to stay at the table, we have to be vocal, but we also have to be able to speak the language of the national politics. We just had a national, you know, Democrat National Convention and Republican National Convention, and various tribal leaders went to both. And so we are engaged at our local and state level politics. Various tribes or have lobbyists, and they talk to governors and their representatives. And so there's a lot of engagement going on. But I think that no matter who's in charge, whether it's a R or D as president or Congress and Senate and House or at the state level, we've got to, as tribal leaders and as tribal community members, we've got to be able to speak both languages of the R's and the D's, and push that our issues are bipartisan or nonpartisan. They really should be nonpartisan. Our issues, whether it's healthcare, education, energy, sovereignty, tribal sovereignty, should be something that both sides support, because there's a trust relationship and responsibility from the feds to us. But that doesn't happen because we're all people. We make mistakes, and we're all politicians, and so things happen, fall through the cracks. And but that's always my advice to tribes and tribal leaders is talk to both sides, speak both languages, and that will force us to stay at the table. Because if we sort of slack off, focus on other things, we miss opportunities, things fall through the cracks, and then that's when we get disinvited by action or inaction. And so I'd say that's what's going to change this whole conversation, is to start talking that language. I mean, like I said, but again, it goes back to this whole idea that all this conversation that's brought up it's complicated. But we have to have this conversation in Indian country, and sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes we don't want to have it in front of non-natives. We want to have, we want to have these conversations internally. But, I'll give an example. And since we're talking about energy, when I first got on the tribal council of my tribe when I was 18, 1992, we were talking about a new National Tribal Energy Association to replace what was called CERT, Council of Energy Resource Tribes, which was the national energy organization for tribes in the 70s and 80s and early 90s. But by the time I was on the council, it was already dying. 30 years later, we're still talking about it in Indian country. We, CJ and I, and our colleagues from the other tribes, MHA, Southern Ute, Navajo, and Crow, we instead of talking about it, we just did it. We created the National Tribal Energy Association, but that was almost 30 years after the fact. And since then, there's been other organizations that are created in this energy space. And so in Indian country, things sometimes don't take a long time to, I mean, they do take a long time to happen. They're not quick. We're not the speed of business. Those are things that we need to change in order for us to succeed in the 21st century. We need to do more work at the speed of business. And so, you know, I'd say, you know, everybody always jokes about Indian time, being late, going over, you know, to me, my grandma taught me Indian time was early. I never saw her go to sleep before the sun. I mean, she went to sleep before the sun went down. I never saw her awake after, and she was always up before the sun. And so that was Indian time, always early. And so we need to change these things in our culture and our society. Things are becoming traditional, which were never traditional. And so, I mean, like I said, we've got a lot of. It's very daunting, and it can and then that's not the point to this. It's just I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think we have opportunities here. We just need to start. We've started that conversation. Hopefully, it will continue. And so, to me, I think we've made a lot of movement today. But like I said, this is really you know, we're up against the 12:30, so I apologize for going late. This has actually been our longest webinar of our 8. And so you know, I like I said, if there's nothing else, I want to thank CJ, my partner and colleague, for his work today. Thank Mike, Alex, and Marina from USDA, are very strong partners in their input today. Thank you, Cleve, Dr. Davis, for joining us and giving us your input. I think it's all been invaluable. Thanks, Rich, for your input. And so we'll have our next webinar will be coming out soon, and hopefully you'll stay tuned for that. And like I said, if there's any questions that come after the fact, they'll come in through to Marina and the team, and we'll try to answer them either on our next webinar or via email. So like I said, I appreciate all the folks who registered, all the attendees who have stuck through with us, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Daniel, everybody.
Thank you, Daniel and CJ and Cleve, and thank you to our audience. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.
Bye.